Hello. I want to talk about the notion of objectification as an idea. I've probably touched on this before, but it's one of those things I occasionally bring up subjects that I have covered before because they're maybe topical again, or I can talk about it from a different angle or whatever. Um, but yeah, this idea of objectification basically it tends to be leveled in criticism of particularly advertising and the film industry, and predominantly from feminist groups. Um, and I think the whole notion of objectification is flawed, and this is why. Well, not flawed so much as I think it's misguided, and I think that it's got a sort of puritanical overtone to it, which I really don't like because I think it's dishonest. Um, I think that there are times when sexuality, when using appealing physical attributes of the human aesthetic, let me put it that way, is definitely overdone, to put it mildly. I mean, I was skimming through music channels the other night on the TV. Pretty much every contemporary music video had a half naked woman. And, as a heterosexual man, I like an attractive woman as much as the next man, but I can see that it's very obvious that is in pretty much every music video nowadays. And I think there's a degree of hypocrisy there because when the likes of Beyonce and others um, basically blatantly use sexuality in their videos and then they turn around and join Me Too, it just seems hypocritical. Now, I don't want to be misunderstood. There's never any justification for sexual harassment. That's wrong. Goes without saying. Um, But I do think we need to talk about the elephant in the room, which is that there are women out there who are very attractive and they know it and they use it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think if you're an attractive person, you use it. I have no objection to that. But I do wish there was more honesty about it. And I think, I mean, we see it with the whole Me Too thing in Hollywood, which I think is sort of devouring itself in some ways. I mean, it had like most movements, it had some important origins because there clearly was a culture of powerful men taking advantage of their position. Harvey Weinstein being the most famous, but there's been many others, of course. And this isn't a Me Too video, so it's not. I've already covered that subject, but I just take a dim view when women clearly try to be as glamorous as possible, very attractive, and they'll say, "Oh, it's just to make myself feel good." Well, if it makes you feel good, that's great, wonderful. But I think we are hardwired to make ourselves appealing, especially at formal events. Now, if you are an A-list actress, you're going to glam yourself up, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But just be honest about it. And don't say it's just for myself. No, it's because you want men to think that you're beautiful. And that's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I just think I wish there was more honesty about it. And I'll probably get shot down for that from feminists. But I think if they're really, really honest with themselves, and it's men as well. I mean, handsome men. Um, why do they why do they wear really fashionable clothes? Why do they work out in the gym? It's to be appealing. There's again nothing wrong with it. And I just think there's a lot of dishonesty over this because people like to virtue signal and they like to be puritanical. Now, to get back to the original issue of objectification, what is that exactly? We hear it a lot, but what exactly is it? Well, let's break it down. It's an adjective um, or rather, it's objectificate. I guess is a verb. Objectify, to objectify. Um, it implies that you're turning a person into an object. Well, no. An object is this. This is an object. It's a remote control. This is an object. A pen. This is an object. Scissors. And you hear from people say, "Oh, you're seeing her like a piece of meat." So if men are attracted to a very sexy woman, oh, you're seeing her like a piece of meat. No, a piece of meat is a piece of meat. A sexy woman is a sexy woman. Not the same thing. Um, I think there are some men who don't know the boundaries. And again, to reiterate, I'm not for a second saying that if a woman's sexy or she's wearing sexy clothes, that's in any way an excuse to, be sleazy. Of course not. I don't want anyone to think that's what I'm saying. But I do see a puritanism from this notion that, for example, if men find a woman attractive, you could be damn sure feminists are going to take issue with that because they'll see it as, oh, it's male control, even though the woman may be in absolute control. I mean, you get this in all sorts of contexts, like just off the top of my head, excuse me, round card girls in boxing. The girls who hold up the number between rounds. Most people who go to a boxing match are going to be watching the fighters and they're going to be watching the fight. But between rounds, the round car girls are sexy young women who hold up the number. Now, that's been the case for about 40 years. It was introduced, I believe, in the 70s in Las Vegas, maybe late 60s. The idea is to bring glamour, I guess, to balance out this, how I described it to one of my Chinese friends. I hadn't heard of round girls before, so I was trying to explain. I would describe it as sexy young women whose job is to bring a bit of glamour into a tough sport. To me, it's like yin yang. It's like ultimate masculinity, and I'm not sure if ultimate femininity is the right word, but it's clearly a contrast where you have these two tough guys, brawling it out toe to toe, and then you have a sexy young lady who's showing off her physical attributes, and she's paid for it, and she's volunteering to do it. Um, I think there's a real puritanism with third wave feminism. I mean, they insist that it's all about empowering women, but they have a very set idea of what empowered women should be. So if a woman is sexy and she's using her sexuality in advertising as a card girl, as a pit girl in the case of Formula One, um, or in any other format, then feminists will immediately say, "Oh, but it's just for male pleasure." My counter to that would be, so what if men like it? Do you expect beautiful women to go around wearing sacks? It's complete nonsense. I think, provided that there is no coercion, provided they are free thinking adults, I'm a strong believer in freedom of choice in that sense. Um, and I do think there's a puritanism with the feminist movement. Ironically, it's kind of similar to religious dogma because religious dogma would take morality with it as well. Um, in the most extreme forms, you get the Islamist narrative and the whole politicizing of the burqa. I mean, the whole thing about the burqa and the hijab is supposedly to protect a woman's modesty, yet we never, we see these sort of things like solidarity with women who wear the hijab. What about solidarity with women who don't? Those brave women in Iran who risk imprisonment and beatings because they don't want to wear the hijab. So I think the modesty doctrine needs to be really scrutinized. But I'm not saying that being sexually appealing is the only thing young women should aspire to. Of course not, or young men for that matter. All I'm saying is that if someone is attractive, I don't see anything wrong with utilizing that. Look, it's been used in advertising since time immemorial. As long as advertising has existed, sexuality has been used. And it is interesting, here in the UK, there was a big thing about page three in the Sun. Now, I happen to believe that showing topless young women in a national newspaper is inappropriate, but only because it's a newspaper, not because they're topless. If that was like an adult magazine, I'd have no issue with it. That's the fact that it's a newspaper. I don't. That's not the Sun has subsequently stopped doing that. They still show young women, but they're partially clothed. The Star, Daily Star, continues to show topless young women. I do think it's inappropriate in a family newspaper. However, I would point out that it's almost someone suggested there's a class issue there. What do they mean by that? Well, I forget who it was, but I read this blog and they pointed out if you take, for example, Manet's Olympia, the famous French impressionist Edward Manet, his Olympia was enormously controversial at the time, but today it's considered high art, and it shows a nude model on the bed, like Rose the Duplicator style. It was hugely controversial at the time, but we don't seem to hold the same standards to art today because it's seen as artistic. And yet, other depictions of sexuality, oh, it's sleazy, it's objectification. The problem I have with the notion of objectification is I think it's a misplaced concept. I think it's suggesting that if someone is using their sexuality, that is the same as dehumanizing them. No, sexuality is part of humanity. Um, I mean, put it this way: I'm a lazy sod, but if I really got my act together and got a good physique, I got a six pack and all. Um, I think I'm Joe Average. I'm not a particularly good looking guy. I don't think I'm ugly either, but I'm somewhere in the middle. And I think if I had a really good physique and someone approached me and said, "Do you want to earn some money by being a model?" I would seriously consider it. And I wouldn't think, "Oh, people are objectifying me," because I would think, "Yeah, well, that's the purpose." That's like, say, for example, you're a artist model. Why do we not see that as objectification? The point I'm making is I don't see why some people get so puritanical over the human form. The human body is natural. And what these feminist groups, because it is predominantly feminist groups who do this, what they need to realize is they're being as puritanical as religious nuts. And I'm not dissing all religious people. There's plenty of religious people that have no problem with sexuality. I'm talking about like really dogmatic, like you need to cover up. Um, like I say, I think it can be overdone, even in boxing. And I've no problem with round car girls, but I would even say sometimes it's a little bit, I don't know. I think it can go a little too far where they're wearing almost nothing. Personally, if I was a promoter, I would definitely have the round car girls, but I'd let them wear a little bit more. I don't know. I just think that it irritates me because I mean, what to those who go on about objectification, they can't simultaneously say that they're all about women's independence if they're then telling women what they should do with their own bodies. I mean, it's interesting how what what the modern world sees as tolerant and what isn't. I mean, with the whole transgender issue, the whole underlying argument of that is, oh, well, people should have a right to do what they want with their own body. And there's a lot of issues around it, but why then, if we're saying it's okay for people to basically mutilate their biology, and if you question it, then you're a bigot. But by the same token, we're telling young men and women if they are attractive that, oh, you shouldn't be a model, you shouldn't get into advertising in that sense because you're just being objectified. Um, look, if you're good looking, then flaunt it. It's really. I'm not saying people should be divas and people should let it get to their heads, but I see nothing wrong with beautiful women be like I'm not saying using their beauty to get advantages, but I see nothing wrong with a sexy woman knowing that she's sexy and maybe using that in some sort of format like advertising, or a man as well who's worked out in the gym. He's got a great physique. It's just aesthetics. That's what we're driving at here. It's aesthetics. And why do we have the shaming of the human form? It makes no sense to me. I mean, I'm not naive. I know there is a sleazy side to all of this. There is. Um, I'm not talking about hardcore porn. I'm not talking about hardcore in your face, like constant, um, over sexualization. I think that can be a problem. What I'm saying is the concept of objectification, I believe, is misplaced. I don't actually believe such a thing exists. Because if a man is attracted to a sexy woman, then you know what? That's just him being a heterosexual man. I'm not going to lie. If I see a sexy woman, I'll probably look. It's just biology. We're hardwired to do it. And it's all about being honest about that. It's not about being sleazy. Likewise, most women, if they're being honest, heterosexual women, are going to be find a really, toned guy, good looking guy. They're going to be turned on by it, and that's fine. Why do we get puritanical about this? It pisses me off because I think it's dishonest. Let me know your thoughts.